Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Moazli Mahem. I'm the very proud Lynn Pippinger Dean of the University of South Florida, Muma College of Business. And let me tell you, on behalf of everyone at the University of South Florida, at the Muma College of Business, we want to welcome you to this great diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace certificate. Guess what? We have more than 105,000 participants. Yes, it's not a mistake. More than 105,000 participants in this amazing program. And we are just honored to be able to offer you this certificate. It takes a village to offer a program like this. And we couldn't find better partners than our friends at Jabil and the Tampa Bay Lightning to partner together to offer you this great certificate. And let me tell you, this certificate usually probably costs in regular times around $3,000 to $4,000. Because of the generosity of the Jabil and Tampa Bay Lightning, we are offering it to you free of charge. You know, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace is a journey. It's not a destination. And I can assure you, we don't have all the answers, but we have the passion, the energy, and the willingness to work with you throughout this journey. And the purpose of this certificate is very simple. The goal is very simple, is to help you and help your organization move throughout that journey so that you can improve your diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organizations. You know, a lot of people ask me, Dean, why are you doing this? I say, first of all, we're doing it because it is the right thing to do, because we want to be a resource to our community. We're doing it to help all organizations out there improve their diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have a business community where no one, really, no one is left behind, regardless of the color of their skins, their age, their gender, their sexual orientations, their religions, their disability, or any other characteristics they have. So it's not just the right thing to do, but also it makes perfect sense. Research and studies after studies, the first one was conducted by McKinsey, but duplicated by many others, show very compelling results. Companies who improve their diversity, equity, and inclusions see higher productivity, better innovations, larger market share, more customer loyalty, and more importantly, very high employee satisfaction and retentions. And now I'm just delighted and honored and very pleased to introduce to you great friend, wonderful colleague, Dr. Alexis Mutu, who worked so hard with the team from Jabil, from USF, from the Muma College of Business, and from the Lightning to be able to offer you this great certificate. So please remember, first of all, that each module, like today and every Wednesday, will begin with an opening session, a second segment with a keynote speaker, and an instructional segment. Now, Alexis, could you please run us through the very first module?
Sure, Moaz, and thank you. So module 1 is delving into emotional intelligence and how emotional intelligence will allow us to better understand diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you. So you're probably asking, module 1 is great. How can module 2 be even better? Yes, it is. It gets better every week. So module 2 will look about these really horrifying stereotypes and biases in the workplace that unfortunately lead in many instances in discriminations. And let me tell you, it doesn't really matter who we are. We all have our stereotypes and our biases. And the purpose of this module is to be able to detect these stereotypes and biases and hopefully do the right thing to minimize them.
So module 3 is taking into consideration how to understand your own organization with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and thinking about emotional intelligence and understanding stigmas and stereotypes and biases, and then applying that information to how your organization is functioning in the realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion, taking into consideration organizational and transactional policies and all aspects of your existing organization.
And then once you understood your organization, where does it stand in terms of that journey toward better diversity, equity, and inclusion, Module 4 comes to really help you prepare for the future. You know, I strongly believe that the diversity, equity, and inclusion is a business initiative. So you have prepared for it like a business project. You have to have your strategic plan with goals, with accountability, with timelines and resources. And that's what Module 4 is all about.
So once you have that strategic plan around diversity and equity and inclusion, you have to recruit and retain employees who will transcend this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Module 5 gives you those tools and strategies to retain those staff and to recruit them and to retain them.
Module 6 is about partnerships. So how do you partner with different stakeholders, for example, with your suppliers and with other entity in your community to really make a difference through diversity and inclusions? You know, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace is a team sport. It requires partnerships. It requires the effort from everyone. That's what Module 6 is all about.
And last but not least, Module 7 is taking all of the information that will have been learned from Module 1 through Module 6 to understand what a sustainable business model looks like that embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you so much, Alexis, and we appreciate your work on this great program, and thank you. Just a few housekeeping items here that are really useful, so pay attention here. Yes, 105,000 of you. First of all, each week, live session will air, like tonight, from 5 to 7 each Wednesday for the next 7 Wednesdays. You have 2 weeks for each live sessions to take the quiz for that module. Yeah. So if you think that you can earn the certificate without passing the quizzes, I am sorry, but that's not the case. We're going to make you a little bit work harder here. And the good news is that the recorded session will be available for you for 2 weeks on the Muma College of Business YouTube channel for you to review and also to take the quizzes. Another good news I have for you, you have an unlimited number of attempts to take, retake, and retake the quiz to score at least 70%. You don't need more than 70% if you got 70%. And I promise I will not check your grades as long as you have 70%. For each module, you will have your certificate, and I will, at the end of the 7 weeks, assist on your graduation and bestow that wonderful certificate on you. And also another reminder, as my team here is telling us, that the quiz for week 1 session is due on Wednesday, April 7 at exactly 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And I can assure you, all the excuses we have heard before, from the dog eating my homework or my quiz, unfortunately, it will not work. So please make sure you have 2 weeks and make sure you pass your quiz on or before Wednesday, April 7 for session 1 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, answers to many of your questions can be found on the FAQ sections. You see the link there. It's usf.to/diversity certificate. We will add more and more to answer to these frequently asked questions. And also there is a box where you can contact us if you have any other question that is not on this FAQ. We promise to do everything possible to answer it in a timely manner. And now, the moment that you've been all waiting for, let that wonderful journey start together. And to start our journey this evening, I am just so honored to introduce to you an incredible member of our community, Mr. Derek Brooks. Derek Brooks was born and raised in Pensacola in Florida here. Probably you remember he was one of the best NFL player, first round NFL draft pick by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 1995. And this began his 14-year Hall of Fame career. Many of you probably recall that really nice United Way commercial asking, who is your favorite player? And the answer is Mr. Derek Brooks. He is absolutely our favorite here in the Tampa Bay area. And also now he is part of the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. Very interesting fun fact about Derek. He is the only person on this planet, and probably even the universe, who actually has two wonderful big rings. One for winning the Super Bowl, and the other one for winning the Stanley Cup with our wonderful Tampa Bay Lightning. So without further ado, please help me welcome our wonderful friend, Derek Brooks, who will help us moderate the first panel.
Thanks for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. Now I would like to kick off our leadership panel discussion. In joining Dr. Moaz and myself, we have Mark Mondello, the CEO of Jabil, a global manufacturing company with more than 260,000 employees across 100 locations in 30 countries, and they are approaching a revenue number of over $30 billion. Mark is married to Kelly, and they are very passionate about giving back to the Tampa Bay and surrounding communities. So welcome, my good friend, Mark Mondello. Mark, how are you doing?
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate that.
Next, and according to me, this other panelist needs no introduction because I work for him. Steve Griggs is entering his 6th season as our CEO of Vinix Sports Group, after serving 1 year as our team president and 4 as our chief operating officer. Steve oversees all of our business ventures at Vinix Sports Group, and we're very proudly to say we are the current 2020 Stanley Cup champions. So welcome to my good friend whom I report to, so I got to do a great job today. But in all seriousness, Steve, welcome to the panel.
Well, thank you, Derek, and great introduction. Well done.
All right. All right, everybody. So, Steve, I just want to start with you. Obviously, in working with you very closely in putting together this DEI program, I'd like for you to share with our audience, why was this important to not just yourself, but Vinix Sports Group in partnering with Jabil and USF on this tremendous program?
Well, I think if you go back 10 years and you think about Jeff Vinik when he bought this team, and Jeff always has taught us to do the right thing. When you talk about what we've done with the Jackson House, the Confederate Monument, our investment with Jabil, with our Community Hero program, just recently giving away $1 million for all the DEI projects and social reform. You know, it's in our DNA to continue to give back. And when I think about what we do in the sports and entertainment industry, we're a unifying organization. It's right in our mission statement. It's part of our values, is that we want to unify people. And, you know, as we were going through COVID, I thought we were looking to unify people. Then on May 25th, in my old hometown, what happened with George Floyd, it was an awakening. And I remember calling you that next morning and saying, I think we're on a different path here. And by May 29th, we were having a meeting with Coach Dungy. And Jeff Vinik was on that call. And we knew then, as my wife liked to say, you need to know better to do better. And right then we knew we had to be better. We had to be better as an organization. We had to be better as a family, be better as human beings. And that's really when we said it was about education. How do we enlighten people? How do we start first within VSG? How do we continue to train and develop people so they are aware what's going on with diversity and inclusion? We brought in speakers. We've been reading books. We've been educating and training like we've never done before. And we've seen it firsthand that education on diversity and inclusion and unconscious bias led us to me sitting in a parking lot one day and calling Moaz and saying, I've watched all the great work you've done with the 2 other certificates with, you know, COVID management crisis, as well as the hospitality management program. And, you know, they had 7,000 for the one program and 10,000 for another program. And as Jeff and I talked about, leaders need to be educated in order to continue to drive the business. And they need to be educated in a different way now. And I said to Moaz, could we create a certificate program like this? And back then I was like, we could get 10 or 15,000 people to join in to really start learning about diversity and inclusion, I'd be really happy. But we sit here today with 100,000 people that have signed up for it. And then our good friends from Jabil joined us and said, we want to be on this journey with you. And I think we sit here today with the 7 modules, which are incredible. The leaders that we've brought in to help with this are incredible. And I think it's going to really teach us to use the right language, to be able to have the toolkits to have those uncomfortable conversations, to have those conversations that bring us together. It creates a real conversation that we need to have about diversity and inclusion. And I think at the end of the day, what's really going to be really important is we're all going to be better. We're going to have better companies, and we're going to be better in this community. And I think it's going to help drive each and every one of our businesses and take us to a new level.
But speaking of new level, Mark, I obviously pass it over to you now. Again, personally, I know we've obviously spoke about this, you and I, but just again, share with our participants, not just Jabil's involvement in how important this initiative is, but the journey that Jabil is on its path worldwide to improve in all areas as well.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. You know, real quick, and Steve, really wonderful comments. So many of your comments resonate with myself, and I know Dean Moaz. First, I want to start with Moaz. What an incredible program. You know, I got to look the last week or so with kind of the run of show and the modules and what you have in store for the folks. It's amazing. And the fact that, you know, you formalize it with certification is incredible. You know, so thanks to you, President Corral, and then Steve, thanks to you and Elizabeth and Jeff and Derek. Thanks so much for as a good friend. Thanks so much for facilitating. You know, when I think about diversity and inclusion, you know, we've been on a journey for a long time, and you know, as a white male, much like what Steve was saying, when the George Floyd incident happened, it had an impact on many of us, and I stepped back and asked myself, why? And, you know, I think we were fortunate enough in many ways to see a catastrophic event caught on video. Mm-hmm. And when you watch that video, I don't think there's a lot of black and white in that video. It's you know, and there's not a lot of gray. And, you know, unbeknownst to me, with Steve reaching out to you, Derek, you and I had breakfast 3 or 4 days after that event. You're a close friend of mine. You're a Black American, and you and I spoke over breakfast for 2 or 3 hours. And I took that conversation, went back to Leslie Coyne and the folks inside of our organization, and I said, we've done such a good job in terms of diversity and inclusion, but boy, are we lacking. And we're lacking around unconscious bias. We're lacking around really, really understanding and having empathy for others. And so there was a lot of companies at the time that were making statements and putting out different messages here and there. We went slow because I wanted to be sure that we led with our actions. All of that led to us, Derek, and you and I spoke about this. We put a 9-person council together, very diversified, and that council today is leading the way for us. They're helping us coach, they're helping us learn, they're helping us to drive awareness. The conversations are raw and honest, and that council is made up of 9 extremely diverse individuals. And the first thing we did in the first 6 weeks when that council was put together, and then we added another 4 weeks on top of that, was we asked those individuals before they did anything, take some time to get to know one another. Yes. And I listened in on some of those conversations, and wow, was it amazing. And just them getting to know one another and each other's background, and again, things, obvious things like skin color and where they're from, but then sexual orientation and why they do a certain, or why they think a certain way. Do they have some neurodiversities? Do they have physical challenges? And on and on. So it's been really powerful. And I think often, why is diversity and inclusion so important? Number one is if we have an environment across Jabil where everybody can be their true self, they don't have to be in character, they don't have to act a certain way, they don't have to be scared about talking about who they are. Heck, we talk all the time in our leadership classes about vulnerability. How can somebody be vulnerable if they're scared that if they talk about their true self, that there's going to be negative ramifications, or they're not going to get a promotion, or whatever that may be? And so I think we're going to strive with a large global organization to be sure that everybody's comfortable being their true self. And then one other aspect I think about, what we've taught ourselves over the years is if I take 6 white males that come from similar socioeconomic backgrounds, and I put them in a room and I ask them to solve 2 or 3 really challenging issues for our customers, and then I take 6 individuals that are distinctly different, really, really diverse. So again, whether it's their skin color, their gender, or their physical challenges, or they got neurodiversities, or their upbringing, or again, economic status, all of that. And I put those 6 individuals in a room, and I asked those 6 individuals to solve the same 2 or 3 challenges for our customers. 8 times out of 10, the solutions will be deeper and more creative from the diverse group. And so that's just a simple illustration of why it's so darn important inside of a large corporation.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that very well. Well, Dean Moaz, when I think of you, man, the one word I think of is impact. You have impacted a lot of people, a lot of programs, organizations over an extended period of time. So when it gets to this particular program and the impact that it has, why has USF, led by yourself, stepped up to the plate and accepted that challenge that was made by Steve, that you guys wanted to quarterback this effort for our community?
Thank you, Derek. I'm just discovering you're not just a great football player, but you're just an incredible moderator here. And I am not very impactful because I speak after 2 wonderful, amazing friends and great leaders, my 2 good friends, Steve and Mark. But in all seriousness, Derek, this is a great question. A lot of people are asking, why the USF Muma Kanjo business is offering this certificate on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. First of all, we really have to acknowledge that this is a very complex topic. There is no doubt. It's a big tent, and you can look at it from different perspectives. And we believe at the MoMA Kanjo business that we have to be good at to our communities, and we have to be a resource. So diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace is not just the right thing to do. Actually, it makes perfect business sense, Derek. Research after research after research earlier on by McKinsey and duplicated by many others show that a huge business case for diversity, equity, and inclusions. As Mark just mentioned, these organizations that work on diversity, equity, and inclusions, they are more innovative. They have better productivity, higher market share, customer loyalty, and also, as Steve and Mark so well mentioned it, they also have employees' satisfactions and retention, which is very good. And also, we believe at USF, at the MoMA Kanjo business, with whom you partner, says a lot about you. And let me tell you, we couldn't find two better great leaders than Steve Griggs and Mark Mandello, and two wonderful organizations that share the same values for us, the values that we should all work together, and no one should be left behind. This is what this. We also realize, Derek, that this is a journey. We've heard this so many times. You know, I can tell you, and I really want all our 1,005 participants, 105,000 participants, Steve. We grew from 100 when we talked earlier. So we want all these wonderful participants from all over the country and all over the world to understand that we don't have all the answers. We really don't. And this is a journey. It's not a destination, but we are committed. We are passionate. We have the energy, these 3-7 weeks, to help them move through that journey and be better in their organization. So no one can be left behind, regardless of their race, gender, sexual orientations, religions, neurodiversity, or disability. This is what this is all about. And it is so exciting, Derek.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being a part of our leadership panel as we get ready to take on this journey, locked hand in hand, arms in arms, and knowing that we're going to change the world. And I just want to leave our 105,000 participants with this one frame of mind. As you enter into these modules, you control one thing: your attitude. You control your attitude. And I asked this question, and I know Steve have heard this, but I ask it again. If attitudes are contagious, is your attitude worth catching? I say it again. As we approach this journey together, think about your attitudes. If attitudes are contagious, is your attitude worth catching? And I hope the answer is yes, because once it's yes, we can enter this journey and know that we're going to be changed people once this journey continues to end. So with that, thank you guys for your time, and I look forward to kicking off our DEI certificate program, and I thank all of you for signing up to participate. Look forward to learning with you.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Why are we here? Well, we're here to talk about emotional intelligence in this particular module and the role it can play in implementing and sustaining an effective DEI program. As per emotional intelligence, it's the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. In this session, you will learn how emotional intelligence can be a critical part of the success in your company and your organization's DEI efforts. So I hope you guys enjoy these next two guests as we get into and talk a little bit about how emotional intelligence not only could play an important part in the business world, but also in your personal lives as well. First, let me introduce to you two of my good friends. First, I want to introduce Mark Mandello. Mark is the CEO of Jabil, a global manufacturing company with more than 260,000 employees across 100 locations in 30 countries, and they're approaching almost $30 billion in revenue projections. Mark is married to Kelly, and they both are very passionate about community service and giving back to various charities organizations, not just here in the Bay Area, but across the country. Mark, welcome.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce another good friend of mine. I have the fortunate opportunity to have a personal relationship with my former head coach and one of my mentors, Coach Tony Dungy. Coach Tony Dungy is a former head football coach here with me with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 5 years, and then he went on to coach the Indianapolis Colts, and they were fortunate enough to win a Super Bowl, and Coach Dungy was also recognized as being the first African-American head coach to win a Super Bowl. But once you hear him talk, you'll understand that's probably not one of the most important things in his life. Coach Dungy is married to Lauren, and they are very passionate about what they get a chance to do in the lives of young people. Coach is also the speaker, nationally speaker for All Pro Dads, and he's also a world-renowned author. And I want to get this right, Coach. Coach Dungy has written 5 books, and these 5 books are Quiet Strength in 2007, You Can Do It 2008, my favorite, Uncommon in 2009, The Mentor Leader in 2010, You Could Be a Friend in 2011, and The Soul of a Team in 2019. And also, Coach went on to also join me as we are both Pro Football Hall of Famers in Canton, Ohio. And also, I love to brag on Coach Dungy by saying he's the only coach to have been the coach of 3 Walter Payton Men of the Year. So, Coach Dungy, welcome to this conversation. How are you doing?
Doing great, Derek. Great to be with you guys.
Well, thank you. Well, first, Coach, I'll start with you and kicking it off. And we're talking about emotional intelligence and how important that can be when you're looking at a team in the world of sports and you're building a team, sustaining a team, and trying to grow a team. How important is emotional intelligence comes when it comes to dealing not just with young men, but young women when you're looking at a team in aspects of sports?
Yeah, I think emotional intelligence is absolutely critical if you want to build a championship team, if you want to build a great organization, if you want to have a good family. Almost anything you do with a group of people, you're going to need that. As you know, we were always looking for highly motivated people. We were looking for people who were driven. So you want people who have ideas, who are bringing things to the table. But to function as a good team, there has to be more than that. You have to know how to fit into a group, how to get the best out of others. And that takes emotional intelligence. You have to know yourself, and you have to know your strengths and weaknesses, but you also have to be cognizant of how you're going to get that out of everyone else. The best leaders are not just the people who are the most talented, but they're the people who can figure out what the whole situation is on our team, in our group. What do we need? How can I help everybody else be the best they can be? And that takes, self-awareness, but that takes analyzing other people and figuring out how you can pour into them as well, because it's not just about making you the best you can be.
Yes.
How do we get our group to be the best we can be? Mark, I know you'd have some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, Coach. I think about your career, your successes. I love the fact that you talk about career and family. We speak about that a lot inside the company, Coach. When interns are coming to work for us, when we're recruiting new employees, or when we have leadership meetings internally, I think people are taught early on, geez, how smart am I? What's my IQ? I took the Wonderlic score. In a large corporation, that largely doesn't matter. we joke sometimes that the C students run the world, and but it's you got to have some degree of intellect. But I couldn't agree more with what Coach said. We speak a lot inside the company about servant leadership.
Yes.
And it's a simple concept that we ask all of our supervisors and leaders to grasp. And it quite simply is, the higher you move up in the organization, the more it's about serving others and the less it is about you. And without a high degree of emotional intelligence, people can't grasp it. And you can be intelligent, and you can lack you start making things about yourself. You become a bit arrogant. You become a little bit narcissistic. The more promotions that you get, you start inwardly focusing on making it about yourself, and boy, that's a recipe for disaster.
Yes.
And Coach, maybe you could share some thoughts, both as a player and as a coach, where maybe you had a team where one of your athletes, their ego ran away and became arrogant, didn't want to play nice with others, disruptive to the locker room, and that type of thing happens in corporate America all the time, Coach.
I was very fortunate to break into the National Football League with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were in the middle of a dynasty, 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. We had 10 Hall of Fame players on that team. But Coach Noll, our coach, our leader, his first message to us was, everybody on this team, everybody's job is important, but nobody's indispensable. And so what that let me understand was, yes, we had great players, and they were going to play some high-profile roles. But if we were going to be a championship team, everybody had to fit together, and everybody had a job to do. Even if I was a backup player, I had a job to do. And those star players felt like they needed to help me become better. And so you got the idea of working together, that it wasn't one person who was bigger than the organization. And that lifted me to kind of my thought process on how to put together a team when I became a leader. And then when I came to Derek and our group, my thought process was, how can I help these guys be the best they can be? We had talented people there, but we needed to bring everybody together and help each other be better. So that was my my call to them. Hey, Derek Brooks, you're a great player and you're going to be fine, but how can you help the players around you, the other guys in your position group, be better? How can we fit together and help the whole team be better? And when we got that, that's when we started winning.
Yes, and Coach, I remember the word that comes to my mind is empathy. And you really taught me in challenging me to make others better. How can I empathize with their situations? How can I make sure that they feel that, they're included? And that inclusiveness ended up being probably our secret recipe to help turning our franchise around from perennial losers to now we're contenders. We're not pretenders, because it wasn't just about, as they say, the superstars. It was about everybody else, and understanding that their role was just as important. And we had to all be included together, and not just actively, but mentally. That inclusiveness, and that's why I would say about, team sports and me being a part of the business world. Team sports kind of allow you to put a barrier around the outside world where it forces you to be together. That inclusiveness, the time we're spending together, probably sometimes more than what we spend at home with our families. So we're not necessarily forced to, but we're accepting of, hey, this is how we need to empathize with each other. This is how we need to make sure everybody feels included. Everybody is a part. Well, in the business world, sometimes you don't necessarily have a locker room per se that forces that environment. And then obviously our facilities, we were tightly squeezed in there together as well. So it was, I won't say it was forced, but it was accepted. And I think the time where I felt easiest for me to be more empathetic, that's where I felt I started to grow as a person, and you started to see those results in my play on the field. So Marcus, as I transition to you, Mark, is there a situation where you may have had a young leader in your company that you needed to wrap your arms around and show empathy to, or you encourage them to be more empathetic to get the most out of another teammate?
Derek, I'd start with, we don't have a single locker room. You said at the opening, we're a company that has 260,000 people all over the world. I don't even know how many factories we have. We have like 50 some factories, but inside the company, it's one Jabil, it's one tribe, it's one community, it's one team. And boy, do I like what you and Coach said. When we talk about servant leadership, Derek and Coach, one of the things that is top of the chart is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
When we have a leadership meeting, it looks like I don't know, a kind of world nation type of thing, because we're all over the globe. Mm-hmm. And yet it's still amazing to me sometimes how people want to judge, make decisions, and they don't take time to step back and go, geez, what would happen if I walked in this individual's shoes? What if I were to take 5 minutes in their office and share a bottled water or a cup of coffee and understand their background, understand their upbringing, understand their religious beliefs, understand their sexual orientation, just because they look a certain way. My wife and I are big in advocating for the community that has neurodiversities and people with physical challenges. And so, you can't always judge a book by its cover. And we have people today all the time. They focus inwardly. They make judgments based on their own upbringing, their own backgrounds, and then they want to project that onto others because they have a point to make, versus starting with, let me seek to understand about this individual or this team that I'm part of, and really understand their background and their points of view. And if their points of view differ from me, why is that? Well, it's because it's because of their upbringing. We're all a makeup. We're all a makeup of our life experiences, good and bad. And I would suggest that the more bad experiences you have in life, when you're in the middle of it, it sucks. But I'll tell you, the more bad experiences you have at a younger age, the better perspective it gives you. And along with empathy, Derek and Coach, and Coach, I'm sure you see this all the time. If you lack perspective as well, boy, is it hard to be part of a family unit, a team unit. And so, Coach, maybe when you think about perspective and some of your life challenges and in the locker room and out of the locker room, how do you think about that?
Well, again, I go back to the advice I got from Coach Noel when I ended up moving up on the staff to be a leader, to be a coach. The first thing he told me is your job is to help your players be the best they can be, to help them be better. And you're not going to be able to help them until you get to know them and know what makes them tick and what they need. So your first job is not to make rules in the sheet and what you're going to do and how you're going to do things. Your first job is to get to know your people. And I never forgot that, because you can't help people be better until you get to know what they're going to need. Yeah, just like you say, no, we're not all the same. So everybody's a little different as you get to know them.
Amen to that. Derek?
So, Coach, as you walk through it, and I'm glad you brought this point up, as you started to move up in your coaching career, I know that you've shared with me, and I've heard you share, there was a point where you felt you was overlooked in terms of being prepared for the head coach's position. And even this past year, you start to see a lot of social awareness and talk about the lack of candidates when it comes to African-American or other diverse head coaches. So do you mind just walking us through your mind frame those many, many years ago when you were going through the process, felt overlooked, even for the Tampa job? I remember you wasn't the first choice, but you were the right choice.
Yeah.
But let's walk through, because organizations sometimes may feel, and leadership may feel, hey, they're being overlooked. But sometimes in your journey, you said it's not about your time, it's God's time and the right time, space, and place when it comes to being overlooked. But see it, obviously, the bigger picture.
Yeah, I did. I was an assistant coach for 15 years. I learned under some great men. I felt like I was improving. I felt like I was ready. And I would go on interviews and I wouldn't get the job. And it was disappointing. And the longer that happened, the more I felt like, gosh, I'm ready. And people don't understand that. People don't see that. And some people were suggesting to me, well, maybe you need to change. Who you are is not what the National Football League is looking for. So you need to develop a different persona. Maybe you need to dress differently. Maybe you need to look differently so you kind of fit in. And I think we need to get beyond that. And we need to encourage our leadership to look for people who might not fit the mold of exactly what we think is the standard. And it was disappointing. And the thing that helped me out was our chaplain, Tom Lamphere. He was our chaplain with the Vikings. And he said, you just have to have faith, as you say, Derek, that God is going to have the right opportunity out there for you. And just wait and be patient for it. Keep training yourself. Keep learning as much as you can. So when that opportunity does come, you'll be ready. But don't get discouraged. And I think discouragement is one thing that hurts us. And that's another thing, emotional intelligence. That, hey, I can take disappointments without getting discouraged.
Right, Coach. What I just heard you say hits home inside of our own organization for sure. You know, I think all of us to some degree suffer with unconscious bias, and man, that is a derivative of emotional intelligence, inclusiveness or lack thereof, lack of acceptance. We have made really good progress in the company in terms of diversity and inclusion and equity for all, but we have so much more to do. And you know, one of the biggest friction points is unconscious bias.
Yeah.
And it bothers me sometimes because we're starting to open our community up more and more. People are speaking more freely, and yet some of the stuff that some of the chatter I hear, some of the stuff that people approach me on, it bothers me because based on their upbringing, they have a bias that they have a hard time working through. And you know, our goal is, and we're far from this, but our goal is you know, we want everybody in the workplace, everybody in the workforce to understand and truly believe they can be their true self.
Yes.
Really believe their true self. If they're a kind individual and they're working hard and they got the company's best interests at hand, they can be their true self without harm, without recourse. And we're not there yet, and we got a lot more work to do. But this thought about unconscious bias, I think it affects us all. And maybe
yes,
one other comment, Derek and Coach. I had an individual that was part of our leadership team, and they had absolute points they wanted to make about unconscious bias and how it impacted them in their career. And so when we got to talking, we went deep. The conversation was raw, and I said to them, well, now that I've listened a bit, thank you for that. How would you feel about working with somebody inside the company that had a different sexual orientation, maybe a gay male, a gay female? And they sat back and they said, that might be a struggle for me. And what I said to them is I said, look, never inside of our company, ever, are we ever going to ask you or challenge your faith, your spirituality, your religion, or what goes on in your family unit.. But when you're here inside of our tribe, when you're here inside of our Jabil locker room, per se, you need to think about your unconscious biases, and you got to be sure that you can work with everybody, and you can do so in a very authentic way. And again, you can separate, okay, kind of family from professional work environment. And again, we would never ever ask anybody to change their beliefs, etc. But when you're in that locker room, you know, you see a man or woman's skin color, or you get a perception. And again, this issue of unconscious bias, we all suffer from it. And we've gotten better, but boy, at Jabil, we got a lot more work to do. But I think it's not just about corporate America. As Derek, as you and Coach said, it's in the locker room. It's part of a team. It's part of a church. It's all around us, and it's a again, a really, really important topic, and hopefully this wonderful program, Derek, that you're helping facilitate, Coach, you're participating in, and that USF and has been behind. You know, as people get through this program, hopefully they leave it with a little bit better understanding of what all this is about.
Right. I agree with you, Mark. And, you know, the two words that I carried from what your example and not just challenging me, but making me more aware is social awareness. You know, I got to be picking up on the emotions of others when I'm part of a team. When I say I'm all in, and sometimes that is hard because, you know, as Coach can tell you, it was many days that, you know, I didn't want to raise my hand as the leader. I tried to put him behind my back. But Coach Dungy got me to understand, especially in one of the most critical points in my career, that I had to do it. And I'm going to share this small story. It happened on really the second day that Coach Dungy was fired from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Coach was cleaning out his office, and it was raining. And I was upset. Mark, let me tell you. No, Mark, I was pissed off. I was beyond upset with our organization. And I wanted to be on the first plane out of town, first bus, first cab. I was that upset. And it was through that moment I went and saw Coach as he was cleaning out his locker, and Coach sat back and he told me this. He said, Derek, you need to get it together. He said, first of all, I'm going to be fine. He said, I have another job that I'm probably going to accept, and that's going to be the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. He said, so don't share that, but that's probably what's going to happen in mine. He said, but even more important than that is you need to get it together. You need to think about all your teammates and everybody that's looking at you and how you respond. If you don't move past this team and this organization is going to suffer. So you need to get it together. And I was like, Coach, I don't care. He said, you care. Right now, your emotions don't care, but you care. So when I think about social awareness, I just think how great Coach was, and probably the most disappointing time in my life that I was losing him as a head coach. He still challenged me to be socially aware of everybody else as a leader. And he sat there and told me, he said, I expect you to lead this team and you guys win a Super Bowl. He said, you will get past this. He said, matter of fact, I know you'll get past this because I'm telling you to get past it.
And Mark, that's exactly what they did. And that was so rewarding to me.
Oh, but Derek, think about what you just said. You want to talk about just a unprompted, honest description of Coach Dungy.
Yes.
And I mean, think about this. In a time where he was probably a little pissed off, he takes the time to regulate his emotions.
Yes.
He allows himself to be vulnerable with you, and he makes it all about you and the team, a team that just let him go and didn't make any of that, and didn't make any of that about himself.
I couldn't believe it.
That story is so reflective of a great leader with just tremendous emotional intelligence. And and thank you for sharing that, because that's awesome.
And honestly, and I tell people when I tell that story, that is probably one of the only times I saw Coach Dungy he was firm, but I mean, he looked at me with the most firmest look as, hey, I know you will move past this because I'm telling you to. So he left me no choice. And when again, just as we, get ready to come down the stretch here, I just think when organizations reach that point, and even leaders reach that point, when you take back and think the things that you just said, whether it's empathy, whether it's servant leadership, God, that's a powerful word, it's a social awareness, and even relationship management. And I think I want to, as I bring this to a close, give you guys a couple minutes to talk about that, because obviously as a head football coach, there's a lot of relationships that has to be managed, on a team. And Mark, obviously as global as Jabil is, you still have that small team around you to help it get together. You have to regulate and manage those relationships within. So I give you guys a couple minutes to talk about how important this relationship management is when it gets to emotional intelligence.
I think any organization, any group, that's what's going to determine your success. How do we handle those relationships? How do we build them? And you're always going to have strengths. Relationships are going to get strained when you have different people coming together, different ideas. How do we do this? But the great groups manage that, and they're able to put them together and say, you know what? We're going to come together, even though we may have differences. We're going to put those differences aside for the good of the group, to win a Super Bowl, to be the number one company in our business. That's what's going to be important. But to do that, you have to handle those relationships well.
Well said, Coach. I would just add to that two things. People work hard for leaders and individuals that, one, believe that they really want to understand their feelings.
Yes.
Really want to understand their feelings and why. And number two is trust. Number two is trust.
Amen.
You don't have trust, you have no followership.
Yes.
Both of you have been at the pinnacle of sport, and you know what it's like, whether it's a coach, an assistant coach, or Derek, you talked earlier about something about when you're on the field. If you don't trust one or two of the 11 players on defense, everything's down. And if you got to look over your back a little bit, and you start to wonder if people have your back, people have your back in the locker room. I think when people know that you are very interested and authentic about their feelings, and then if people trust you, but the reciprocal of that, the flip side of that is if your actions, there's a lot of leaders out there that blah 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 blah. Mm-hmm. They talk a lot, but they don't walk the walk. And employees, players, they're a lot smarter than we give them credit for at times in terms of watching what you do, not what you say. If people don't trust you, your followership goes to zero, and if your followership goes to zero, good luck.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I just personally want to thank both you guys for this time. Obviously, Mark, for personally being one of my accountability partners in my life. Obviously, Coach Dungy for continuing to build our relationship and not just be a mentor to me, but a mentor to many. And I will end this by giving a quote, one of my favorite quotes that I've heard Coach Dungy say. I just want to share with all of you. It is, the secret to success is good leadership. And good leadership is all about making the lives of your team or your workers better. To me, that sums up emotional intelligence. And I hope at least one of you got better by listening to us today. I promise you one person did, even if it was me. So again, so thank you, Mark. Thank you, Coach Dungy. And again, I can't wait till we get together again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, Derek.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Doreen McCauley, and thank you so much for being here. I know it's been said already how important it is, but we really are in a time of great change when it comes to diversity, equity, and especially inclusion in the workplace. And I am so proud and happy that there's so many of you here today to help be on that journey, and you're going to be on that journey with us as we go through. So today I'm going to talk to you about emotional intelligence as kind of a foundation for this journey that we're going to be on. But before I get into that too much, let's just go to the agenda, and I'll go to the slide with the agenda to let you see a little bit about what we're going to cover today in this, your first session. So first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about the journey of a better DEI in your organization. And we really have devised a certificate program here that we hope will really help you in seeing kind of the full spectrum of starting with the individuals within your organization, then moving to the organization as a whole, and then into the community to see how you can truly make a difference. Then we're going to go into 3 major concepts. And these 3 major concepts really are going to be at the heart of what we're talking about today, and they really need to be something we understand as we move forward. So I'll talk a little bit about those. Then I'm going to go into what is emotional intelligence. And now I know a lot of you are very familiar with the concept, but we're going to look at what emotional intelligence means for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace specifically. Then we're going to talk about some of the personal and organizational benefits. And then we're going to provide you with some next steps. We're going to probably help you take the tools, if you will, to be able to move forward and to really adopt some of these things for yourself personally, and then for your organization as well. But before we go there, I want to just take a moment to take a look at this picture. When I was trying to figure out the best way to really try to have people understand the importance of looking at emotional intelligence, I was out for a walk, right? That's one of my ways of trying to ruminate things in my head. And I found these 2 trees, and they were, to me, a perfect example of what we're looking for. So when we look at diversity and equity and inclusion, we look at the concept that has been around for a long time, but we have looked at it intellectually, right? And so if you look at the first tree there, it has this kind of one trunk coming up, and it's growing only to the one side. And when we look at diversity, equity, and inclusion as simply from the intellectual point of view that we need to have it, we have to have it, we need to have the metrics in place to have it, we miss something. We're not fully there, right? And that really usually is the inclusive piece that's suffering, right? But if you look at the second one, you'll see that there's those 2 trunks, right? And so we have the intellectual and the emotional side. And in this, we're really looking at embracing the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and getting really to the heart of it. And as you can see, the result is so much greater. Okay, this kind of abstract thought, how does that really apply to the workplace? And so I'm going to give you an example. So think of a gentleman or a woman, someone who is going to be looking at planning a mall. Okay, we're looking at designing a new mall, right? So the first project manager decides that they're going to go and they're going to look to see what the standards are for individuals who are in a wheelchair, right? So they need to make sure that it's accessible for all people. And so they want to have it. So they go and they tell their project team that you need to make sure that you benchmark against the industry and make sure we know exactly what it is that we need to have in our mall to be able to make it accessible. Okay, they're considering the diversity of their customers in that situation, right? But what happens to the other individual who's doing it? So let's say we have another individual who's looking at designing a mall, and they tell their project team that they want them to actually go, and maybe they want them to put 50-pound weights on their feet to walk around the mall. Or they want them to actually sit in a wheelchair and actually try to go around it. So that they actually are forcing the people to really get into the perspective. Now, you can never really truly know someone else's perspective, but you can try, right? So when we look at emotional intelligence and in diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's the difference between looking at the standard, maybe adopting something that you've benchmarked against some other organizations, and truly trying to understand it and what it means for your employees or your customers. And so this is really what we're going to try to get you to do as we start this journey for you. Now, I know a lot of you have seen this already. You all know that the journey, and it's been spoken about already, but I just really want to reiterate, we're really starting with the person because every organization starts with its people, right? And we know that if we take care of our people, that's the important piece. And now, just to speak a little bit more about, the motivation behind looking at emotional intelligence in this certificate program, I'm going to welcome Dr. Alexis Mutu back. And I'm going to ask her just a couple of things about, kind of her motivation around why she felt the need originally to have this, and how she really resonated from her own experience with emotional intelligence and the value it has with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Three major concepts really are going to be at the heart of what we're talking about today, and they really need to be something we understand as we move forward. So I'll talk a little bit about those. Hello, Dr. Mutu. Thank you so much for coming back just to speak with us just a little bit. I was just talking about how, inspiring it is to be involved with something that's this important. And we look at the reaction from people, it really is something that people are engaged in and interested in right now and making a change. So I was wondering though, and this is why I wanted to ask you back a little bit, can you speak to a little bit about what inspired you, to develop this the way it was, with looking at emotional intelligence first and kind of looking at that individual before going into the organization and into the community. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
Sure, and thank you, Doreen. So when I understood that emotional intelligence could be developed, it felt like there might actually be a solution to this idea of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and thinking about transformational change in people, because to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion makes a lot of assumptions. From when you're dealing with emotional intelligence, you then realize very quickly that not only can it be developed, but it can illuminate issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion so that we can have a better workplace and we can have a better world.
Absolutely. It's so very important because, when we look at kind of all the issues, right, there really is a lot for people to digest, to people to take in, right? And
Yes.
so it's really important.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And I was just wondering if you could just tell me a little bit more though, maybe about your own experience. Can you tell us maybe from your own experience how you've seen, your own development of emotional intelligence and how that's helped you, just to give our participants, kind of an example of how you've actually seen this come to light for us?
Absolutely. So I'm a woman of color, and obviously, have to endure a number of stereotypes. But it never occurred to me that I had my own stereotypes and my own biases until I began developing my own emotional intelligence and using those skills to be a better leader, to be a better friend, just a better human being. And when I realized through developing my own emotional intelligence that I had my own biases that I needed to work on, it really made my work experience better, my opportunity to lead better, and my opportunity to just make a dent in this world to make it better. And so that's why emotional intelligence is such an important component of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we all have biases, even when we are in protected classes. And that idea of developing that emotional intelligence can only bring to light what is it that we don't know about ourselves and what is it that we can work on for ourselves.
Fantastic. Well put. And I really appreciate you coming back and how it, allowing us to kind of see it from your perspective, because I really do think there is a lot of value in this. And I want to say again, thank you for being a champion for change with this and really, putting yourself behind this. So thank you very much, and take care, Dr. Mutu.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCauley. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mutu. We appreciate your time and appreciate your insight and your passion for this. We are very happy to have someone who has been a great catalyst for us here at the Muma College of Business and has really been the force behind this. So thank you very much for that. So now, moving on to those three concepts that I wanted to talk to you about. The first one I'm talking about are emotions. So emotions are these very powerful entities that have an impact on us. We take in information in our senses, and oftentimes it is that emotion that is going to be the first reaction, right? And so we know from neurology that when we take in information, right, the emotion gets it first, right? And our emotional reaction can sometimes overcome, right, our more rational, logical thought. Okay? And now I want to make sure as we're talking about emotions, we understand the concept here as well of neurodiversity, right? So it's not necessarily the same for everyone. For a lot of us though, right, that emotion can be something that can be overwhelming, right? We could be reacting to things in our environment that we don't even know, right? And that can cause certain behaviors in us that we may or may not be aware of. You know, as you journey through this certificate, you're going to talk a little bit about some of those unconscious reactions that we have. And so it's really important that we understand the impact and power of emotions because they are very complex. So if we take a closer look at this slide, you can see, you know, just these are the basic emotions that we talk about in the literature. And specifically now when we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, I really want to hone in on a couple of these things, right? We look at, you know, anger, maybe fear, right? Trust issues, all of these things, you know, maybe you're a little bit agitated, you're a little bit concerned. All of these emotions have an impact on the way that we behave in the workplace, in the way that we communicate in the workplace. And so what we really, really want to take a look at today with emotional intelligence is how do we harness all of these to be able to get past those kind of gut reactions that may be having a negative impact or in creating these obstacles in the workplace, and so that we can truly understand and get past them to be able to have really clear, effective communication around diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. The next concept I want to talk about is perception. So the other really key point here is to understand that everyone has a different perspective. Now, this picture that you're seeing here, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it before. You know, some of you are looking at it and seeing a young lady, and then some of you are looking at it and finding an older lady, right? And there is a contrast, or maybe some of you are seeing both. And this is something that, you know, you've been taught and to look at it from different perspectives, the different perspectives of people. So this is something that we're, you know, all pretty familiar with, and it is very important to understand that when we look at, you know, perceiving anything, there's kind of three major components that we have. We have the perceiver, so there's ourselves that are perceiving the situation. There's the actual target, the thing being perceived, and there's a lot of, you know, components to that. But then there's also the actual situation. So all of those things come together to create how we perceive something. And because there's so many different layers to that, oftentimes perception can get in the way of clear communication or understanding in the workplace. Right? So when we look at emotional intelligence, it's really looking at understanding that your perception is going to be completely different than the perception of someone else. And so then you need to be able to be aware of that. But now just to add a little bit more complexity to that, I'm going to give you another example that you may not have seen before. And now with this one, I'm going to show you a picture, and there's going to be a very obvious tiger. Okay? So when you see the picture, there'll be a very obvious tiger. But I'm going to ask for you to find the hidden tiger. Okay? So just take a look at this here. Find the hidden tiger for me. Just going to give you a couple of seconds here to try to find that hidden tiger. Okay. Now, if you're still looking for an animal, I'm going to ask you to stop looking for an animal and maybe look for the word, the hidden tiger. Can you find it now? I'll give you a little bit of help here. So if you look at this slide now, you can see in the red circle coming kind of down the neck of the tiger, it says the. In the center, you have the hidden, and then kind of down the leg, you'll see tiger. Now, when you perceive this situation, I gave you some instructions, right? But I used words in a way that were maybe a little bit vague, or maybe you didn't understand. It was novel to you, right? So the way that you perceived the situation was very different. And if I would have maybe been a little bit more clear and said, can you please find the words, the hidden tiger, maybe the communication would have been more effective, okay? But it takes getting past those layers of knowledge, of understanding, of experience to be able to really get sometimes to the heart of what an issue is. And now just to kind of give you an example in the workplace, what that looks like. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the TED Talk, but if not, maybe take the time to see it after you, watch these, this lecture and this session. There is a TED Talk by a lady by the name of Jodi Ambury. And she talks about being asked to take her authentic self to the workplace, right? So when she talks about that, she said that she brought her authentic self to the workplace, but she didn't really understand what that meant to the others, right? Because when she did bring her authentic self to the workplace, she was told she was too aggressive. She was told that, you know, maybe her appearance, especially her hair, wasn't as professional as they would have liked it to be. right? And so she talks about this experience of her in the workplace, and she compares it to a Halloween party that she goes to. And at this Halloween party, she's told not to bother wearing a costume, but when she gets there, she's the only person who doesn't get a vote in the costume party, right? And so in the workplace, when we're looking at our diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, we need to be careful that we understand exactly what we're asking for of people and that we actually allow them to do that, right? So in this case, if you're looking for people to bring their authentic self, it may not be what you're used to, right? It may be a change for you, but what does that mean for your workplace, right? And how do you work through that? And so understanding that is a very, very important thing. Now, the last concept I want to take a look at is change. We are in a very interesting time when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are in a time where there are so many of you that really want to see something different happen. We do not want to have the programs of the past where they come in, it's maybe a training program that you have once a year, and then it is not really no change at all, right? There's no real outcome of it, right? And so what I'm going to ask of you is to consider as you go through this certificate that this is going to be a change process for you and for your workplace. Now, why is it important to look at it like that? When we look at any kind of process when it comes to change management, the most basic there is a Lewin's model, where you unfreeze the situation, you move, and then you refreeze it, right? And the key here is to unfreeze. But to unfreeze people, right? If you're going to unfreeze the way people think about things, the way people do things, you are impacting their identity, right? And so if you're going in and you're going to ask someone to question the way that they do things, question the way that they behave, question the vocabulary that they use, that's really an identity issue. And that comes with a whole host of emotions. It comes with fear, it comes with anxiety, maybe it comes with joy because they want the change, they want to embrace this. You know, I was talking to one of my graduate students, and he was really talking about his experience, and he talked about this push and pull because he's so very excited that things are changing, that he's seeing that people are taking diversity and equity and inclusion really seriously, but at the same time, there's this joy, but there's this fear, and then there's this anxiety that come with it, right? So that's a lot. So what we're asking for you when you focus in on emotional intelligence is to give people the tools to make this a sustainable change, right? It's the idea of if you give a person a fish, they'll eat for a day. If you teach the person to fish, they'll fish for a lifetime. Right? So when you're asking someone to change, you're asking them to change their identity, question the way they do things, question the way that they ask things, question the way they talk about things, right? You need to be able to equip them to deal with that effectively. And that's where the emotional intelligence comes in. Okay? And that's where we have this need for people to truly understand what it is that they are experiencing, to be able to help them move past it. And just to give you an idea how I wonder how many of you can recognize this. Okay, this is the kind of original cell phone, if you will, right? It was that box that you'd have, you put it in your car. I can still remember the day my dad came home with the first one for us. It was probably late 80s, early 90s we had it, right? But if we look at your diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we haven't changed the way we're doing it from early 1980s or late 80s, early 90s, right? Would you really want to work with a company that had technology from back then? So maybe for some of you, you're more familiar with this one, right? Something that came in the 2000s, right? The flip phone, right? And we advanced our technology, right? But would you work with an organization? Would you feel confident if you went into an organization that you were going to work with, that you were going to maybe invest millions of dollars in, and you seen that their staff were working on flip phones? Probably not, right? Okay. You'd expect the latest technology, right? You'd expect the latest and the greatest technology, and whether it be in the way that they're manufacturing something, the way that they're providing a service, right? So why is it any different for diversity, equity, and inclusion? We need to take a fresh perspective. We need to catch up to all of the advances that have been there in the understanding, right? I've had a lot of people that I've talked to about this over the last little while as we prepare for this. And some people will say things like, Well, well, first of all, it was affirmative action, and then it was diversity, then it was diversity and equity, and then we, added in inclusion, and now they have JEDI, right? Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. There's just too much. There's just too much to keep up with, right? Well, if you look at technology again, right? Would you consider technology from 20 years as acceptable? No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't consider that acceptable. So you need to make sure that you take diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really see it as a time for change, a time for you to do something different with it. So now let's get into emotional intelligence itself. So what is it that we can do? How can we do this, right? And I really like this picture because it is actually just a variety of different emotions, okay, in people's eyes. So maybe just take a couple of seconds here and see if you can identify those, right? Because in our workplaces right now, because there is so much change happening, we have people who have been marginalized finally speaking out. We have people who have been marginalized and speaking out and finally being heard, right? And then we also have people who are marginalizing other people who didn't even realize that they were marginalizing them, and they don't know what to do, right? Or then there's others that just don't know what to do, right? And so with this comes a variety of emotions. And oftentimes those emotions can be anger and they can be fear, right? And unfortunately, when we have anger and fear, or we have anxiety, okay, or we have mistrust, right, that festers as a result of this, there is no real communication, right? And communication breaks down. And so that's where we need to infuse emotional intelligence in our leadership and in ourselves to be able to really understand, how can I grasp what's happening? How can I grasp what I'm feeling and understand it, and then be able to effectively communicate with others? So just to bring this to life to you, I'm going to give you an example. I had taken my MBA. This is a few years ago. I won't give you a date on that. But when I was in my program, there was 41 of us in the program, and we were from 12 countries. And the age range, there was for 25 to 26 years between the youngest person and the oldest person in the group. So when we get there, we're all excited. We're excited to be involved in this great new adventure, but we start to work together, right? And so 3 weeks in, right, on that first day we get there, everyone's all excited about being in the program. And then by 3 weeks in, people are leaving the room in anger, fits of rage. We have people leaving the room in tears. We have groups completely melting down, not able to function with one another, right? And we have this toxic environment that is created. And it was simply because we all had such diverse experiences, diverse perspectives, and we were not being inclusive. And so I have to give credit to the director of the program at the time. He fired us. He said, you know what? We all need to take a break. And so what they did is that for a week, they stopped all our classes and they brought in a consultant. And the consultant came in and they taught us and they tested our emotional intelligence. And for a week, we looked at emotional intelligence and we looked at what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like. So what does it look like to really be inclusive in an environment? And from there on, we were able to sail through, right? And it was amazing to see this difference of understanding someone's perspective, understanding something completely different from a different angle. And because of that, we were able to grow and move past it, okay? So when we talk about emotional intelligence, what is it? So now, again, I know a lot of you are very familiar with emotional intelligence because it has been linked to improved leadership, improved understanding of your customers, improved teamwork, job satisfaction. Emotional intelligence has been linked to a lot of benefits in the workplace, right? But I just want to give, for those of you who may not be as familiar with it, just a couple of minutes here just to talk a little bit about what emotional intelligence is. So when we look at emotional intelligence, it is basically the ability for you to understand and control your own emotions, and then be able to be aware of and be able to interact with the emotions of other people, right? And when we look at this, and now this is going to be the Pullman model. So there are a variety of models when it comes to emotional intelligence, but this is the mixed model we're going to take a look at. And it looks at both the self and the social, right? And so we have these 4 quadrants that come from the self, the social, from recognition, and then from regulation. And so when you're looking at the self, your self-awareness, are you able to understand the emotions you have? What are the triggers that are triggering that emotion in you, and what impact does that have on you? So are you self-aware enough to be able to do it? And then once you are able to recognize that, are you able to regulate that? So now, are you able to, if someone says something that's going to trigger an emotion in you, maybe it's anger, maybe it's fear, are you able to manage that to then be able to effectively interact in the given situation? And now, why is the self-management a really important piece here? And it is a really important piece of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's because in our workplaces, we have these norms, if you will, of behavior that's desired, right? And if your emotion, goes against the emotion that you're experiencing in a given situation, or the desired, so what you're experiencing in a given situation goes against the desired, outcomes, or the desired emotional expression of your workplace, there is a disconnect here, and we call that emotional labor, right? And emotional labor can be very exhausting, and it causes a lot of stress in individuals, right? And so if we have these emotions happening in the workplace, but we don't know how to manage that and manage that experience for ourselves and be able to find our ways to have that outlet, then we're going to be experiencing this high level of emotional labor that really does cause a lot of stress. But then from the awareness side of things, we need to be able to understand how we impact others, or the emotion in other people, right? Showing empathy, right? So that's that trying to be empathetic and understanding a perspective. So if you come into a situation that you may think is fine, but then someone else reacts to, you can choose to ignore it, or you can choose to try to figure out, well, why are they reacting? Why are they having that emotional reaction to this? And can we move past that? And that's where we get into that relationship management. It's not only are you able to recognize it in someone, but are you then able to facilitate moving past that, right? And I want to give you just a quick example of this from my own experience. I was working with a group one time, and this was actually in my earlier days of teaching. And I went to, I was doing an HR class with them, and I was trying to give them the idea of a job specifications and looking at, job analysis required for a job description. And so what I was going to do is give them an example. And so I said, well, let's make something that, everyone's familiar with, a bakery, right? And I said, so what we'll do is we'll talk about brownies and then making bread, right? And so then I could see one of my students, when I said, we'll talk about brownies and making bread, kind of have a little bit of a reaction. And so that's okay. And so then I said, okay. So then I went in through the process of how would you start to make the bread? And then, all the things you have to do to kind of set it up before you would move to deal with the brownies. And then I said brownies again, and I could see this reaction on her face again. And so it had gone from a little bit of a, what was that? To now she was visibly angered by this. And so it was a smaller group. So I asked her, I said, Jana, I said, can I ask you seem upset? I said, by something I'm saying. I said, is there something going on? And she's like, I can't believe you. I can't believe that you would be so insensitive. Professor, this is not what I would expect of you. So my first reaction is anxiety. Oh my goodness, what have I done? Fear. What is she talking about? So my student, which I'll say, is she was from Jordan, and she was Muslim. She had a hijab on. And at that time, this is 20 years ago, and I will admit my ignorance. All I knew it was headdress, right? And so she's sitting there, and she's very angry at me. So I know that she's had different experiences than me, and then now I've made her angry. And so I asked her to explain, and she said, well, from where I'm at in Jordan, that's a very derogatory term to call someone a brownie. And I had, this reaction of, oh my goodness, that wasn't my intent, but I understood that it was a completely different perspective. So I explained to her my perspective, so to me, a brownie is a cake-like, substance that you get at a bakery that's in a square shape. And so once I explained it to her, she was fine, but then I altered, right? And so, when you go around, if we were looking at all those quadrants, right, I had to adjust myself, right? And so I went and I said, well, you know what, let's go through the rest of this example, and I'll talk about cookies. So I talked about bread and cookies, and I moved on, right? So now in that situation, emotional intelligence played a very significant role, right? I was able to recognize the fear and anxiety in myself, and be able to kind of control that enough to be able to have a discussion with the individual, and also able to identify in her that something I said really was one of her triggers, and I needed to be able to, and with the relationship management, is to look at that and be able to say, how can we move past it? Okay. So now to share a few more examples of how we can see emotional intelligence play a very important role in the workplace when we look at diversity of perspectives. I'm going to move now to a clip of a video that I did earlier with one of my colleagues. And when we were in this clip, my colleague is Susan Bean, and she is actually the instructor for our certificate program here. We have an emotional intelligence and servant leadership certificate. And so we're going to call on Susan Bean, and she is going to be able to share with us a little bit about her personal experience and provide us with some examples of how we can see this come to life in the workplace. Susan Bean is a facilitator here at the University of South Florida of our Emotional Intelligence and Situational Leadership Certificate Program. She works with our Office of Corporate Training and Professional Development, and she also has her own consulting practice. And I'm really excited that Susan is here with us today because Susan has worked with people all over the world on looking at how emotional intelligence can cultivate a diverse perspective in the workplace. She has worked with Fortune 500, nonprofit, government organizations. She is actually a Brickman Method Master Trainer and facilitates emotional intelligence kind of in many corporate settings. She has earned her degree from the University of London, and before opening her own consulting company, she was the manager of executive development for Walmart. So we're very pleased to have Susan join us. We will go now to Susan. Susan, thank you for being here with us today. We really appreciate it.
Great. Well, thank you for inviting me, Doreen. I'm looking forward to spending some time with you.
Fantastic. So now one of the things we were just talking about is about emotional intelligence and how it can be really a great tool in the workplace when you have diverse perspectives. And I'm wondering if you could maybe just first speak a little bit about how you use emotional intelligence when you're working with leaders in various organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned that word perspectives, and to me, that's what diversity is really fundamentally is all about. It's about how we all have different perspectives of how we think things should operate, right, and how people should behave. And so what I've found, you mentioned the Berkman method, and that is an assessment instrument that I use extensively with individuals, with teams, and with organizations. And what the Berkman really helps us to do is to really, as an individual, understand what it is that motivates and engages me, right? What is it I'm interested in, and therefore I may prioritize, and what I might deprioritize. It also helps us to see how I show up, right? What are the behaviors I demonstrate when I walk in the room? Those tend to be our learned behaviors. I've learned over time this is what makes me effective. And then really what becomes very important is if I can look at the world when I look at the world through my eyeballs, how do I expect other people to behave? How do I expect them to communicate? How do I expect them to make decisions, to pace the work? And all the time people are operating that way, I probably don't even notice. It's a little bit like sitting in a room and breathing, right? I'm breathing oxygen, but I have no idea how much. Because it's there. But it's when they don't operate that way. When my boss doesn't speak to me in the way that I expect, or when my colleagues are not making decisions in the way that I expect, that might trigger a different response in me. In terms of a stress behavior response that might be much more ineffective. And so working with individuals and with leaders, it's really helping them to see themselves in that multidimensional fashion and to really understand their own perspectives and how those might be very different from other people. And in the the Emotional Intelligence and Situational Leadership program that we have at USF, what we do there is we start with the Emotional Intelligence Appraisal, the Travis Bradbury Talent Smart Model, just to get a baseline of those 4 skills that you mentioned earlier, and then use Berkman to say, how do I build those 4 skills? And of course, that starts with self-awareness. And then we then go on to say, okay, so how do I then apply that to some common leadership challenges, such as giving feedback effectively, influencing, especially influencing without authority, influencing my peers and collaborating, communicating through change and uncertainty. All of those things, if I understand how I naturally show up and when that might work and when I might need to flex. So that's really how I'm using it with both individuals and with teams. Emotionally intelligent teams, much more effective as a group to build emotional intelligence as a group, as a team.
Fantastic. And actually, if you don't mind maybe going in a little bit deeper, talking about some of the components, if you will. So looking specifically at, self-awareness, can you maybe give us either an example or maybe a little bit more detail about how, personal self-awareness can actually help you be more effective in these diverse environments?
Yeah, absolutely. So self-awareness is the fundamental baseline skill of emotional intelligence, right? We have to develop self-awareness first. And so often we'll take the Berkman assessment, and I'll sit down with somebody and say, well, yeah, I could have told you that. Yes, I am self-aware. Okay, but sometimes it's not until we see. I mean, I had that same reaction 20 years ago when I went through my first assessment. But it's when I see it written on a piece of paper, and suddenly I become much more self-aware of day in, day out, I'm exhibiting those behaviors, or I'm having those responses to other people. And really starting to see that that's the way that I've heard it termed, is it's looking in the mirror and realizing that the way that I'm reacting is a me issue and not a you issue. And so to give you an example of that, okay, I may expect that somebody is very diplomatic and tactful in their feedback, in how they speak and communicate. And when I receive very direct feedback, I may react, right? I may get my feelings hurt. I may not react in a way that is particularly effective. What Berkman helps us to see is that's because of my expectations not being met, not necessarily because of how the other person communicated. And so I think that self-awareness can be very, very helpful there to really understand and embrace my own expectations and manage those. And also to see that there are other behavioral options out there, right? How I do it may be a great fit for many situations. How you show up in the same situation may look very different. And there are times when, if I could borrow how you do it, I could be more effective. Which is not to say that how I operate is wrong. It just is giving us additional tools for our tool belt, right? It's giving us other behavioral options that we can choose from.
You know, that's a really good point, right? It's not about a right or wrong. It's just about, you know, the context, and, you know, the way we perceive a situation, the context is so important in that, right? And so that's really a really important key piece of that. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what I very much believe in, is that there's no right and wrong, right? There's just different. And that's where really, when we start thinking about diversity of perspective, and what I've found so often, the biggest takeaway with the team, or when I'm working with groups, is we may start off by saying, well, how I do it is right and how that person does it is wrong, right? And then we start to talk about, okay, so in what situations is their style actually a better fit for the situation? And so how I do it is never going to be 100% for every single situation. I've got to be able to borrow other behaviors. And if a team can walk away saying, I'm seeing other behaviors not as wrong, but as different, and I can start to see the value in when those might actually be better than how I do it, then I feel like I've achieved my goal.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And, you know, on the other side of that too, though, when we look at emotional intelligence, we look at taking in information, right? So can you talk a little bit about how, you know, demonstrating that empathy for someone else can help, you know, with communication in the workplace, and how that may be a good tool as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we're really talking about there is the social awareness piece, right? So emotional intelligence has two sides to it. There's the do I know it, and do I do something about it? Or to put that another way, I may be very self-aware of how I show up. I may be very good at reading the reactions of another person, but I kind of blindly go on anyway. And so when we're really talking about social awareness, it's about reading the room, reading the reactions of other people, taking a pause and choosing to do something different. And that's really one of the tremendous benefits that we get through using the Berkman assessment, is how a person shows up when they're being effective has zero correlation to their expectations. But what that person does from a stress behavior standpoint when those expectations are not met is correlated to their expectations. So if I can really become an observer of other people, an observer of behavior, and I can start to pick up on those clues of when they're going into that stress behavior, that is a clue to how I need to operate. So, for example, somebody who's usually very chatty in a meeting and suddenly goes quiet. Can I see that, right? Can I see it? And can I do something about that? Can I ask a question to bring them back in? Can I ask for their opinion? So really, I always talk about it as becoming an observer of behavior, becoming an observer of people, noticing those other responses and those emotional cues that people are giving you.
Fantastic. That is wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing this. I do have one final question though. And I'm just wondering, because, you know, in light of everything that we've gone through with COVID, with kind of our civil, you know, awakening in this country specifically, I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about how, you know, how leaders with high emotional intelligence have maybe fared a little bit differently than leaders who haven't exhibited that same emotional intelligence, and how it kind of shows the benefit of emotional intelligence in general when we're looking at, you know, these diverse perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say in this last year, as you said, between COVID and the social justice movement, I would posit that emotional intelligence in leaders right now is more important than it has ever been. And so if we think about where the barriers between who I am in my personal life and who I am in my professional life, those barriers have come crashing down, both through COVID as well as through everything else that this country and the world has gone through in the last year. And so if I am emotional because of something that is going on in my life or behind my office door because my kids are running around, right? And my leader is not acknowledging that. I think often the perception has been that they don't care. And I think in many ways, I've seen some leaders rise to the occasion incredibly, and I've seen other leaders not do so well. And I think often it was an avoidance, and it wasn't an avoidance because of any ill intent. It was an avoidance, I believe, for two reasons. One was maybe I'm not comfortable with emotion, right? I don't want to get into that kind of emotional space because it makes me feel uncomfortable. The other, I think, is it was how do I have a conversation in which I don't have the answers? And so it's leaders who've shown that courage to step into a space in which they weren't in control. Step into a space in which they were willing to just ask a question and then listen and not feel like they had to fix it. And also leaders who are willing to flex that behavior and step into situations that are perhaps more emotional than they're comfortable with. Flexing into behaviors, flexing outside of their comfort zone. And I think it really, this last year has tested us in terms of all four quadrants of that emotional intelligence model. It's tested all four of those skills. Some people gravitated into that space much more easily than others. Others, it was a big step, but we could all go there. It's whether we chose to do that. Yes, and that really is what emotional intelligence is all about. It's being able to take a step back and choose to do something different, in which to make you more effective in more different situations with more different people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so very much for coming and sharing your experience with us and your knowledge. As our the participants go through this series through the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Certificate, they're really looking to the emotional intelligence as that foundation piece. And so, thank you so much for showing us kind of from that practical point of view. What does that look like and how important it can be. So thank you for your time today, Susan.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So thank you very much, Susan, for that great experience and sharing with us kind of from your own personal experience to help bring some of this to life. So now I just wanted to take a few more minutes to talk about some of the other benefits that we have and really hone in for you on what it is that we want you to take from this. And we want to specifically look at the benefit of reducing stress and increasing communication. So now, as I mentioned, there is a lot when it looks at emotional intelligence in the workplace, especially when it comes to leadership and teamwork that we already know. But specifically to diversity, equity, and inclusion, I want you to consider the benefits of being able to reduce your own stress when dealing with things, right? When dealing with these uncertain situations, right? Because anytime there's a major change, it's uncertain situations, right? And then being able to increase your ability to effectively communicate with others, right? And so that's the two main things that we need for you to take away from this as tools that you will be able to use as you move forward. And so speaking specifically of tools, right? What is it that you can do then? How is it that you can take this emotional intelligence and really make it an effective tool for your organization? And the first step we're going to ask you to do is to evaluate yourself, right? Honestly, use the time to reflect. And when you do that, you want to make sure that you are not giving desired, right? It's oftentimes when we do these assessments, we can kind of give what we believe to be the right answer, right? That self-report does have its complications, right? But if you really want to have that honest reflection, you want to try to take the assessment and understand that effectively. And we're going to talk about assessments just here in a few minutes. We're going to offer you some tools. But then I want to make sure I hone in on the fact that you can develop your EI. That's the second step here, right? We want you to take the time to evaluate yourself, but then take the time that it takes for that personal reflection and to develop your emotional intelligence, because it really will be the foundation you need to be able to move your emotional intelligence kind of up a little bit, if you will, and then to be able to improve your diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organizations, okay? So when we look at assessments, okay, there's kind of 3 main points that I want you to know is that you can evaluate yourself. And so if you look at the resource page that's provided for you, there's a variety of resources there that we have listed as examples for you. Now, some of these, you may have to go to a consultant to have. If you're a larger organization, that would be a more beneficial situation for you. But we've also put some free resources there so that you personally can take the time to kind of evaluate yourself and see where you stand. But the next thing is to remember that you can improve your emotional intelligence. This is something that you can work on, right? And so we're going to give you some of the techniques. Again, we'll provide that for you in a minute here, just so that you can see ways that you can try to infuse a more or a better understanding, if you will, of diversity, equity, and inclusion in your day-to-day life, right? And then the other key piece is to reevaluate, right? If we want this change, right? We talk about, you have to unfreeze, move, and then refreeze, right? Well, that refreeze takes that reevaluation, right? So you want to kind of always make sure that this is something that you are looking at from time to time, because it is not something that is a kind of one and done and it's fixed, right? This is going to be an iterative process, right? Remember, we talk about things change, and you have to kind of keep up with things as they change. And so really always monitoring your emotional intelligence is going to be a very, very important piece of that. So what does it look like? So just as a sample here, to give you an idea, here are some of the questions that you may expect to look at the emotional intelligence assessment, right? Can I recognize the emotions experience as I experience them? I lose my temper when I'm frustrated, right? You would be looking at answering these from, a strongly agree to strongly disagree type of scale. People have met me and told me I'm a good listener. Right? I know how to calm myself and when I'm anxious, right? So these are the types of things that you're looking at to be able to understand how you yourself interact, and then how can you interact with others around you. And one thing I often get from people that I'm working with is they'll say that, well, I have a manager, and they think that they're very emotional intelligent, but I don't think they are, right? You know what I mean? And so maybe they've taken the test, right? Because we talked about, giving those desired outcomes as opposed to being very truthful with what you're giving, right? And, for those individuals, right? And if you're maybe one of those individuals, you're trying to figure out maybe, well, I think I'm emotionally intelligent, I'm not, right? But think about it from a perspective of empathy, right? Has anyone ever come to you and told you that you've offended them, right? You go back to my classroom situation with the bakery example, right? My student knew that I was emotionally intelligent enough that she could challenge me on that, and we could have a dialogue around that. And so if people are not challenging you, if people are not making you feel uncomfortable when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, maybe they don't feel that they can, right? And so that could be one thing. So if you're like some of the people that I've worked with, and you have that manager who they believe thinks they're emotionally intelligent and may not necessarily be, that is something that you need to maybe, that would be a way to broach it with them for them to understand. And now looking at developing your emotional intelligence, there's a few tactics. And again, I've put you the titles here for you, and we'll talk a little bit about them. But please, again, in the resource page that is available for you after when you get into the module of this, these are all explained out for you as well. They give you some quizzes and external tools that you can go to try to help you develop these. So the first one is self-reflection, right? Again, we need to be aware of our role in this. And if you're here today, you are wanting to know your role in this, right? So this is the first step in that self-reflection, but that needs to be a continuous process. Know what triggers you, right? And whether it triggers you with anger, or it triggers you with fear, anxiety, what is it that triggers you that influences your ability to have an open communication with people, to really understand people, to understand what it is to be inclusive, right? So what are those triggers that cause that emotion in you, that then cause that barrier, right? And then empathize with people. Practice trying to see things from their perspective, right? Trying to really, and again, you can never truly understand someone else's perspective. And so that's why, we have to sit back sometimes and say we may not have the answers, right? But be able to empathize with people and be able to try to see it from their perspective, right? And so then, own your own emotions, right? And so you are going to maybe not be able to contain all your emotions all the time, but you need to own them and understand them, and then be able to effectively use that emotion to be able to move the needle, move the conversation, right? And be able to help to see things from a different perspective. And then practice mindfulness, right? So we talk about the stress, right? of getting to know yourself and that development. Well, if you practice mindfulness, that helps with that self-awareness and understanding kind of how you are reacting and how you are understanding things in the workplace. So that's going to be very, very important. And so then finally, I just want to reiterate that, when we look at emotional intelligence, it really is kind of that foundation for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. We have so many individuals in the workplace that come from such diverse backgrounds, whether we're talking about gender identity, whether we're talking about sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, age, ability, all of these things, right, come into play in the workplace, and they are going to be, not ignored anymore, right? And so as you are moving forward with your diversity, equity, and inclusion, right, you need to be able to have honest, empathetic conversations with people. And if you want to be able to prepare yourself, prepare your leadership, and prepare your organization to have those and to really move that needle forward, right, you need to be able to practice that emotional intelligence at the foundational level first, right? And so I just want to put in a quote there. You can take a look at it from Bruce Lee. Just to look at it, says emotion can be the enemy, okay, if we give into emotion, lose yourself. But you must be at one with your emotions, right? So you must be at one. You must understand them because the body always follows the mind. So something to consider and to keep in mind. So before we finish off with this today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask one of my colleagues that's going to be presenting with us next week, who's going to be taking you on that next step, that next journey, of personal discovery. And he's going to be, doing the second session on implicit biases and in the workplace. And so I'm going to now introduce Dr. Tony Kong to come, and he's going to give us a little bit of a understanding of what we can expect for next week. Welcome, Tony. Dr. Kong, thank you very much for joining us today.
Hi, Doreen. What a great session.
Thank you very much. Well, as you know, then we have just kind of looked at the importance of emotional intelligence and this journey as a foundation for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I just wanted to ask you here today just to maybe give our participants a little bit of an idea of what they can expect in the next session. So if you mind giving us a little bit of a preview.
Sure. Next week will be Module 2, and we will focus on biases, stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination in the workplace. We will appraise beliefs about privilege and justice related to race, age, gender, sexual orientation, disability, religion, and so forth. We will also develop a better understanding of stereotypes and implications in the workplace. We will discuss how stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination can negatively affect individuals' effectiveness and success in the workplace, so that we can better understand institutional and structural racism and explore action-oriented strategies.
Fantastic. That sounds like there's going to be a lot of great information for people next week, especially as they're trying to develop and improve their own diversity, equity, and inclusion within their organization. So thank you very much for sharing that. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed the session today. Thank you very much for being here. And again, I'm so excited that so many people are so interested in seeing real change. And so thank you for being on this journey. Please don't forget that you do need to take the quiz. And if you wanted to watch the video again, you have 2 weeks to do that. And you need to take the quiz within 2 weeks. And you're looking for that 70% to get the pass for the certification process. But now, before we leave, just to help you out with that, Professor Jihan is going to come on now and give you a little bit of information about the actual quiz platform to ensure that you can do that effectively. So thank you and take care. Jihan?
Thank you, Doreen. What a great first session. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Professor Jihan Chobanoğlu. I am the McKibben Endowed Chair Professor in the Moma College of Business at the University of South Florida. I would like to share some of the information with you that is going to be regarding the quizzes and some of the technical issues. So I've been looking at the comments that you have been making. So please allow me to share my screen. I'm gonna just show you my screen here. I would like to just tell you that the quiz platform that we will be using for this certificate program is Academia Central. It's actually a MOOC. MOOC stands for Massive Online Open Course. As you know, that we've got more than 100,000 people, and also they are very active. Usually, we are going to utilize this website. Many of you already opened account, and some of you did not and are going to do it. So please go to mooc.academiacentral.org, and then you'll be able to do it. If you have any problems, we'll be happy to help you. When you go to mooc.academiacentral.org, you will click on the diversity course, as you see here on the screen. And then after that, this is what you are going to see here, that you need to click on register first. And when you click on register, this is what's going to come to you. One of the most problems that we are seeing is the username. As you can see here, the full name is the full name, your full name, and the public username should not have any space or special characters. So we usually advise that you can put your first name, last name, no space. If that username has been taken before, you can just simply put maybe a number or a year or whatever that might be to make it unique. And then also please double check, triple check your email address, because if you don't put your email address correctly, then it is going to, you're not going to be able to get the activation email, which is going to follow next. And then once you come, just like you see on the screen here, it will tell you that an activation email has been sent to the email that you just provided. So again, please double check that email is correct. If not, go back, re-register with the email. This is what the email looks like. And if you don't see this in the inbox, just go, please look at the spam folder. Sometimes it goes there. If you check the spam and the inbox, you still don't see it, chances are high that you may have put your email incorrectly. Please re-register or enter a different email. Again, more than 70,000 people already registered. And once you do this, you are going to see this screen. Now you are registered in the system. And now you need to enroll into this course, and you just simply click on enroll now. That's going to bring you into this screen that you see right now, and you just need to click on view course. That's going to just bring you, many of you again have done it, you may recognize it, and the quiz will be available there at 7:30 p.m. tonight. If you click on the session 1, you will be able to access the quiz. You have 2 weeks to take the quiz from today. So don't worry, you don't have to go immediately. And for those of you who are not watching this live, the recordings are available, which I'm going to go in here on the website, usf.2/diversity certificate is our short link. It will take you there. And you'll be able to find this link. What you are watching right now, the live, will be available. So you can rewatch again if you'd like. Or, of course, you can watch it again before you take the quiz or after you take the quiz. Also, we have the LinkedIn available. Again, you will be able to find that on our website. Those YouTube provides the auto captions after the live show, but LinkedIn does show during the live show, just like right now. We know that about quite a few of you already watched that. Slides, some of you asked, we looked at the comments. Slides, unfortunately, we can't give them, but you have the videos. Please feel free to look at them. Again, rewatch as they are available. And the MOOC website is, some of you have seen 403 error. That means just simply too many people at the same time. Our servers are waking up. Additional servers are being added. Just be patient with us, and it will be just fine. Also, if you have any problems, you already know this email, but please email us. I would like to thank USF MoMA College of Business Marketing team and the M3 Center at the University of South Florida, my graduate students. They are all answering your emails. And again, please be patient with us. We are going to get you into this platform, and you will take your quizzes, and you are going to earn this wonderful certificate. Thank you so much for your attention, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.